Welcome to another edition of the Dental Today podcast. Thank you for stopping by. This is brought to you by LabMediatv. My name is Hezekiah Morales, and here we go. Remember to follow us on social media at LabMediatv.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Dental Today podcast. We are excited to have a gentleman with a very interesting story, over 10 years of direct contact and experience in the dental field. We're going to hear a little bit of his transition and very interesting stories as well. From AD2, the CEO and owner, we are talking about Mr. David Williams. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hezekiah, thanks for having me this afternoon. I appreciate it. It's good to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for coming on the show. You are out of California.
That is correct. We're based in Riverside, California.
Riverside, California. We did talk about you having 10 years of direct experience with the dental field, but please let us know.
It wasn't
always direct. There's an interesting story behind all this.
Yeah, it's funny to say that. As I tell folks, I've been with the company for about 10 years, but really, I've acquired most of my dental knowledge over time, as I say, via osmosis. I grew up in an orthodontic household. My father was a private practice orthodontist for his entire career, and he spent about 25 years lecturing internationally with another gentleman, Ron Roth. They were both pretty prominent orthodontists in their days. And but as I joke, I had braces 3 times growing up as a kid, so I got my feet wet real early on with dentistry and orthodontics and what have you, and then over the course of time got involved with this company that was actually started by my father in about mid-2007, and I came aboard with him on a full-time basis in about mid-2010, and to kind of try to build the company and get it going in a good direction.
So, but before you got into the company and you decided you were going to get involved with the company, what were you doing before?
Yeah, I've had an interesting career. This was really my first foray into the dental business as a full-time occupation. Prior to that, I'd actually been mostly an entrepreneur, starting different companies over time. I got an MBA back on the East Coast in the early 90s. Spent a number of years in technology. Started some companies, was with a couple companies. Prior to AD2, was with a small software startup in Newport Beach, California, that was acquired by Google. Google's a small search engine company, a few folks might have heard of. And so I spent 3 years at Google over there in their technology groups, and then left Google in mid-2009. Kind of was, just taking some time off to relax and, if you will, smell the roses, and talked to my dad a little bit. And he had started this company in about mid-2007 because he'd always felt at the time that he and his partner Ron Roth were lecturing that, often they do a lot of lecturing in foreign countries, that the doctors loved what they were learning and hearing from them, but they were told, geez, we really can't afford to buy this equipment that that you want us to use to make this diagnosis. And so my dad had always felt, when I get older, I'd love to make a nice articulator that costs a whole lot less. So these, because if they could afford to buy it, they could treat their patients the way they should be treated, which is all he ever really cared about, was just the best possible solution for patients.
Right.
And so in about mid-2005, he started putting pen to paper to sort of develop this concept. And then I believe somewhere in about mid-2006, he and a gentleman that had been with Panamint Corporation for quite a long time, about 20 years as their lead engineer and designer, joined him, and they ended up developing an articulator. They initially had manufactured it offshore at the time, and then after I'd gotten involved with the company in about mid-2010, shortly thereafter, I moved all the production back into the United States.
Nice. I really like to hear that. But before we go into this any deeper, you were doing business outside of the dental field. Now we know you got involved because your father started it, but how did the conversation start for you to come into business into the dental field and with your father, which sometimes can be a little controversial in certain families? How did this all come about, and how how are you now the CEO and the owner? What was
that's a great question. I've been very fortunate. Both my folks are, well into their late 80s. They're both alive. They're both in very good health. They've got all their mental facilities up here. And so I've always had a great relationship with my father. But, we never really had a chance to take a boys trip, just him and I anywhere, just to hang out. And so after I left Google, was just, as I said, just kind of relaxing. And we were talking one time on Skype because they're based out of the Bay Area. And had said, geez, why don't you come over to China with me and see how we're making the articulators over there? And I was like, I just wanted to take a boys trip with him. And so we jumped on a plane and went over there. And I spent some time in the factory in China and learned quite a bit. But when I got back home in Southern California, I sat down at my laptop and my mind the wheels started turning. And as my fingers started working, I started typing, and before I knew it, I had about four pages of bullet points of just things that I had seen that maybe needed, from a business perspective, needed fixing. There really was no business, what I call business infrastructure, in existence for this fledgling company. There's just so many deficiencies I saw as a business person that I couldn't help but have it pour out of my fingertips. And so I sent it to my dad and I said, look, these are a lot of things I've seen, let me fix this or build it or, do this for you. I mean, you've done me right in life. Let me return the favor. And he looked at it and said, well, sure, that'd be great. And so I spent a couple months, 3 months, doing these things. And of course, as I got into it, doing these things, I stumbled across more things that I thought, well, that's lacking. This is broken. And started a separate another page of bullet points. And so by the time I'd finished all the first things, I had a whole nother menu of items, and again went to him and said, geez, there's some other stuff I found. Would you mind? And he said, nope, that'd be great. And so I went on my way with that. And it finally got to a point where I said, look, I think we could really make this thing go as a business. It's going to take some work for sure. But, I think I can do that. And he kind of looked at the time. I think he was, this was in 2010. He would have been 80. He would have been 80 years young at that point. And he just looked at me with a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, thank God, because really all I want to do is lecture. And as I say, go out and preach the gospel." He goes, "I want nothing to do with running a company on a day-to-day basis." And so that was kind of where I got my feet, put both feet in, and if you will, rolled up my sleeves and really started going. And it was definitely very challenging for people who've ever started a small business, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have, being dental technicians. Absolutely. They'll understand that on any given day you wear 22 different hats. You're putting out fires. You don't have resources available that large companies do. So you really get indoctrinated by fire. But as well,
I like that.
Given that it's in the dental industry where all I really had was, as I say, knowledge via osmosis, suddenly you are involved in something and dealing with doctors and lab technicians that have a very specialized high level of knowledge. And you quickly find yourself batting out of your league, that you realize I'm either going to have to lie my way through this thing, what they call fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it.
But also, I went ahead and enrolled in what was called a FACE course that was being offered by some of the doctors that my dad had taught back in the day. And so I took a FACE course, and truthfully, at the time, my knowledge was still so very slight that, relative to the knowledge I have now, I couldn't fully appreciate what I was learning at the time, but really have been able to connect a lot of the dots since then. And as I say, I know just enough now to be dangerous.
That is definitely an interesting point that you brought up a second ago. At some point, the knowledge that you had was, you call it osmosis, right? Through osmosis. It was from the outside. Now you were the inside. You know how crazy the life of a doctor can be, as well as a dentist, as well as a dental technician. And so let me ask you this. Did you experience some of these challenges in terms of the crazy hours and everything because you had to deal with doctors and technicians, or was that something that not so much?
No, truthfully, being a very small company, I can't say that we were really subject so much to crazy hours. of doctors and technicians. In the same breath, though, I will say, when I first got involved with the company, our primary markets were outside the U.S. in Mexico and South America, and to a much lesser extent in Europe. So to some degree, our hours were dictated more by time zones than actually the craziness of doctors and technicians. But I will say, though, there were a lot of hours logged early on because of the fact that, I was still trying to get my arms around this. And literally when I took the company over, there was no real inventory control systems in place. There was no physical inventory. There was no electronic inventory. There was none of this. And so just getting the company late, just as I call it, just building out the infrastructure to actually be able to manage the company and account for everything within the company consumed an awful lot of my time. And it's every time I needed something, it didn't exist, I had to go build it. And so initially it was enjoyable, but in the same sense very frustrating because there was nothing there and everything had to be created from scratch still or procured or what have you. Now, almost 10 years later for me, now at least I have all these systems in place. When I need something, I can just go and this template exists. Whatever I need already exists, and it's a lot more time efficient, and you can actually, it runs like a real business.
That's fantastic because now we're able to measure and then make the adjustments necessary. Absolutely. You did mention that you started, or the company started in the Latin American markets or foreign markets in Europe as well. But when did you begin to transition your services or your products here to the United States?
Yeah, it was sort of a two-step process. As I mentioned early on, when I got involved with the company, they were manufacturing some instrumentation. I mean, albeit in a very small scale, but nonetheless, manufacturing articulators and face bows and another instrument, what we call the MCD, for checking condyle placement. This is all being made in China through a manufacturing partner there. And once I'd been with the company for about a year, and again, as my knowledge started ramping up, I realized where we needed to make some changes and improvements in our instruments. And so I was attempting to work with our manufacturing partner in China and found it fairly frustrating in that changes, getting feedback was very slow, getting cost updates on proposed changes was slow. The time, just the sheer time difference of working, I think they're about 10 hours apart from us. That was frustrating. And quite honestly, at the time, if your listeners can remember back to what the economy in the U.S. was like during 2010 and 11, 12, it was not a good time for the U.S. economy at all. And I hit a point of frustration fairly early on in trying to get these changes and improvements to our products made, where I realized these people don't seem like they're very engaged in our product. I don't feel good about sending our money offshore anymore. I think I need to do something to help our country. And so even though it was a very painful process to transition, I shut all of our manufacturing down in China and moved all the manufacturing for all products. Even though our product line was small at that time, I did move all the manufacturing back to California.
Wow.
And set up shop here, got offices, developed a network of manufacturing partners locally in California that we could work with, because we do outsource most of our machining and processes such as anodizing, etc. We do all the final assembly and QC checking within our offices.
Oh, okay.
That was sort of step one of getting involved into the U.S. market. We needed to raise the level of visual appearance of the product as well as function of the product. Once we had done that, we definitely developed a better level of acceptance in the marketplace. There had been a stigma associated with, oh yeah, they manufacture their stuff over in China. I noted that there had been a stigma associated with that. So when we introduced our first domestically manufactured products at the end of 2012, they looked much different from what we had been manufacturing before. They were a much higher end look and quality, finish, and function than we definitely had before. So they looked much different than what we've done. We had a great story to tell the market with the introduction of these products to let people know, hey, We sucked it up. We had a tough year. We transitioned all the manufacturing back to the States because it was the right thing to do. And that story really resonated with customers at the time. People really appreciated that. As well, I introduced, I've been doing it now for about a year and a half. I've learned a bit more about the industry and where I saw as openings that were possibly needed. And so I introduced a line of magnetic mounting plates because I noticed that when I would go to trade shows for labs, I would show my articulator, and they thought that people would say, it's a pretty articulator. It has a nice price point, but I already have 20 of this Stratos articulator or this Artex articulator. If I buy another articulator, that's what I'm buying. And it was a very short conversation because I really had nothing to talk to them at that point. But what I did realize shortly was the fact that once these labs had made their investments in articulator platform, X, Y, or Z, they also were stuck buying the magnetic mounting plates from that manufacturer to go ahead and mount their cases.
Right.
And what I saw was most of these manufacturers, in my opinion, seemed to take advantage of their customers because they were charging, $3 to $4 per plate to mount cases. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem right to me. I mean, if our goal is to make great quality products for a lot less, to sell them at a reasonable price, we should do something about that. And so we actually introduced a line of mounting plates that fit most every major articulator brand in the market, and priced them on average for about 50% less than what the manufacturers were doing. And so we introduced that at Lab Day Chicago in 2012, and it was a stunning response from the attendees there. It was the first time I had actually been able to do a show where I felt like we were somewhat relevant, where people were interested in our products. And I walked out of there going, I think we may be onto something.
Wow.
And that's become a tremendously successful product line for us that it's now in use in probably at least 1,500 dental labs within the U.S. But it's also given us great channels now to know lab owners, lab technicians, to know what they want. It's allowed us to introduce new products that we've been able to introduce to existing customers. So that was really, I think, moving the manufacturing back to the U.S., as well as introducing that line of mounting plates initially, that really got our foot into the U.S. market and suddenly moved the revenue needle up quite a bit for us as a small little company, where we really felt like, wow, that was a great year for us relative to where we've been. I mean, we were still a very tiny little company, but it felt good to know that we made a material impact on our revenues.
And not only the revenues, but impacted the market. Because as you mentioned, I've used Apple products. My father loves Apple products, all that. That's fantastic.
Sure, we all do.
But I have an iPhone. I love iPhones. But when it comes to computers, I stay away from the computers. Why? Because their system is a closed system. So as you mentioned, I find myself forced to buy everything around that, or rather within that enclosed room called Apple, right? And that sets certain limitations for me. The same thing goes with the lab and the doctor. And what you're saying is amazing, that your product is certainly compatible with several platforms. Now, you did mention to me before, or a couple of days ago, that not only does your company offer these solutions for the articulators and articulators themselves, but you also have other offers. What other offers and solutions do you have for lab technicians and doctors?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as doctors go, I mean, that was really where we started. That was the basis for founding the company way back when. So with doctors, we've always, we continually improve our products over time. So we have, we have a line of articulators, anatomic face bows, an instrument that we call an MCD, stands for measures condyle displacement, which doctors may know more generically is a CPI, or condyle placement indicator. We have a hinge axis recorder, which actually traces the motion of the jaw. So these are instruments that have been around for quite some time. We've recently introduced an item we call an easy bow, which is based around Dr. John Coyce's principles of that the incisal edge being 100 millimeters from the center of the hinge axis, and using a Fox plane bow with a laser level to identify the midline of the face as well as horizontal. that's started to take off very nicely. From a lab side, certainly the articulator is an applicable item for the lab. The mounting plates are been highly successful with labs that we've been very happy with. As well, about a year and a half ago, and again, it's all about just as with the mounting plates, we kind of shattered closed ecosystems with the manufacturer. We've sort of done the same as well. Lab technicians will know that the Kois facial analyzer has become quite popular through the years, and historically that's been a closed environment as far as what articulator you could mount the Kois FaceBow record on. And about, I guess it would have been in Lab Day 2018, if my memory serves me correct, we introduced a line of transfer platforms that would fit not only the AD2 and Panarin articulators, which had always been in existence, but we also introduced transfer platforms for the Stratos articulator, which is probably the most popular articulator in the country, Artex, SAM, Cavo. Since then, we've opened it up for the Dinar Mark 300, for the Hanau Wide View. So again, we've provided something that will fit most major articulator brand that's out there, with a few exceptions. But I think by and large, we probably have a good 85% of the market covered. And what it's done for doctors and lab technicians both is it's made the FaceBow, specifically the Kois facial analyzer, the EasyBow. It's made the FaceBow like Switzerland, where it's neutral. It's not bound to any one articulator anymore, because all you need is the right transfer platform, and you could put that FaceBow record on any articulator now. And that's something that's new. It hasn't really existed before. And again, it was kind of like when I initially had shown the mounting plates in 2012, that people thought, wow, this is a great idea. We got the same type of reception at that Chicago Lab Day in 2018 when we did it. And it was, it's also been quite successful, and it's really moved for us. And it's gotten us a lot of great exposure with labs, with doctors. Labs are certainly appreciative of it because, particularly in today's market, I mean, labs are very attuned to cost savings and limiting costs on supplies as well as capital equipment costs. And truthfully, I've learned the last thing the lab owner or lab technician really wants to do is to have to go out and buy another articulator. And, I can't tell you how many calls I get. This new doctor sent me a case on, he uses a SAM articulator. I don't have a SAM. What do? I don't want to spend $2,000 on a new articulator, but I want to do this doctor's work. And it's, well, come to find out that doctor likes to use a Kois facial analyzer, and he sends them a little white index tray. Not a problem, Mr. Lab Technician, because unless your doctor is looking to articulate that case back in his own office, which candidly most doctors are not, they want the lab technician to do that work and just send them the crown or the bridge or whatever. Then with the transfer platforms we make now, that lab technician can go ahead and take that index record and mount it on an articulator that the lab technician is most comfortable with, and on an articulator that the lab technician wants, rather than one that he's forced to use or forced to go buy. And in a worst case scenario, the worst case for the lab technician is he has to spend $189 from us to buy a transfer platform. And once he does that, he's good going forward.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, your offering presents the effectiveness in the communication between the doctor and the technician. Absolutely.
It makes it where it gives what I call freedom of choice to the doctor and the lab technician to work with the instrument that they work on best. I always put the caveat out there: if the doctor is very adamant that he wants to be able to articulate the case back in his office, then certainly the lab technician should mount it on the same articulator in his lab so that there's a transferability there. But again, if the doctor is really not that interested in articulating the case and is merely looking for the crown of the bridge, then the doctor can work on an EasyBow on a Kois facial analyzer, which is highly popular now. And the doctor can do what he or she does best with that, hand it off the lab, and the lab can work on an instrument that he or she works on best as well.
And they don't have to purchase another articulator, but with what they have, they can continue to work. That's very interesting. What does AD2 have coming up?
And just for you and the audience out there, the reason we actually go by the name AD2 is our actual corporate name is Advanced Dental Designs Incorporated. Mm-hmm. And because we started off with a lot of our market being south of the border, a lot of our customers simply would say Adidos because it was much easier for them to say. And it became more and more prevalent. And the first logo we had was just an AD2, and it's just kind of gone from there. Coming up, we've always, one of the things I enjoy most now is talking to lab technicians and doctors, and because I find that particularly lab technicians, they're like MacGyver. You can give them, if they need something, they can go in the back with a roll of duct tape and some acrylic and super glue and a little bit of dental floss, and they can build exactly what they need. And, so they're tremendously inventive, and I always appreciate that. So a lot of conversations that I have when I'm talking to technicians and owners or visiting a lab is, what do you need that you don't have? And to get ideas from them, because a lot of times they've got great ideas that we can easily capitalize on and make things for them. And I can tell you, there's nothing that will make a potential customer happier than when you show that you've listened to them and you've implemented something, an idea that they had. You've involved them in, we do a 3D print, we show them a prototype, we get their feedback, that they're actually involved in the making of this product. It's really satisfying for us, and I think as well it's very satisfying for the doctor or technician to know that they're so intimately involved. And ultimately you spit out this nice, pretty product, at the end, that they can go, wow, I did that. Yeah. And that is good. That being said, we do have a great program coming up that we've been working on for a while. I mentioned the development of what we call our Easy Bow, which is a fox plane bow with a laser level. Because one of the things I realized, I was at the NADO conference, Vision 21, in Las Vegas in January, and I was sitting at a round table with lab owners, and they were all kind of lamenting the cost of rework and how they account for it, how they deal with it. And, me being a dumb manufacturer, I like to say dumb. I think I've got a little bit of intelligence, but look, I'm a dumb manufacturer. What causes the rework? How much of it is an internal problem with your lab versus an external problem, within the dental office? And, no disrespect meant, but the lab owners had said, the majority of it seems to come from the doctor's side. And I asked them, like, well, what if, how much of it is caused by, no Facebook record, an inaccurate Facebook record, a bad mounting? And they all kind of nodded their heads in unison. And I asked, well, what if I could give you an instrument that you could, for really cheap, that you could give or sell to your doctors for next to nothing, bring them into your office, show them in 20 minutes how to use it, that you could get great Facebook records each and every time from that doctor that you could then go ahead and mount the cases with. And collectively, their eyes all kind of lit up around the table, and I had their ears. And so then I started talking about this Easy Bow that we've been developing, and a program whereby we could put that Easy Bow into the lab owner's hands for very inexpensive, let them bring, because I find there's a very good, doctors and labs, if they have a good working relationship, they're willing to learn and listen and get together. And so we've been bringing this out to labs now at a really inexpensive price, letting them bring doctors in, quickly educating them, showing how easy it is to use, so that as lab people, all they're going to do going forward is get a little white index tray from the doctor that they snap into a transfer platform on an articulator of that lab technician's choice, mount the case, do the work, and hand the work back to the doctor. And so everybody wins, because the fact that the lab technician is able to get better data from the doctor, they're able to mount better, they're able to produce better work because of the fact that they've gotten a good, accurate Facebook record. The doctor's happy because the work that comes back is better and more accurate. And ultimately, he spends less time in the chair with his patient trying to make this, whatever it is, fit properly. So it's kind of a win-win all around. And, I'm in the background as a manufacturer. Yeah, I make a couple dollars on it too, but we're certainly, this program brings it in under market price to these folks, because we want to get it out in the marketplace and get that interchange and that improvement in work, rapidly moving.
For sure. And I honestly believe that a lot of what you're saying is certainly the vision for this podcast. How can we have a conversation where we can hear somebody bring forth a challenge, and somebody can add their experience and their knowledge to that conversation. And how can we improve the processes so that both parties can end up with a phenomenal workflow, and in the end, the patient can benefit from all of this effective communication and effective workflow and all these optimizations in processes. So I think that's fantastic. Now, for our listeners, we have, I would say, about 60 to 70%, maybe more like 60% of our listeners are lab technicians.
Sure.
In a laboratory, then there's another 40, 35 that are doctors. But how could we follow AD2? How can we find these solutions? Where can we get these things in our hands?
Sure. Great question. We are, so certainly AD2 has a great presence on Facebook as well as Instagram. We do a number of lab and doctor shows both each year. Most of the LMT Lab Day shows, the AACD, American Association of Cosmetic Dentists. What else? We work with, we go to if you're a specialized doctor, we do the OBI annual conference. Some years we'll do the American Association of Orthodontists show. We do some regional lab shows, usually about every other year. We may go to Oregon, Texas, whatever. Those are some bigger shows. We try to keep our website updated with where we're going to be, shows coming up. So that's always a good place to go, as well as we'll be teasing that out on social media. And we definitely.
What's that web address?
Our URL is www.ad2usa.com.
And the 2 is the number, or TWO?
That is actually numeric 2. So it's Alpha Delta, the number 2, USA.com. And if I could take a moment to make a shameless plug, I wanted to just show you. This is the first time I'm actually showing it anywhere. This is our new and improved Easy Bow that's coming up now. We just did a version of this, and I realized we found in the manufacturing process there's a better way to do this that is quicker, easier, and cooler than we've ever done before. And we're going to be coming out with this in about the next 60 to 90 days. Most people may see this as a Coist bow, where normally your midline indicator slides in. You notice I have this instead. What's terrific about this is you got this, and it's simply a magnet that holds it on in place. So you simply snap it on with magnets, as well as a leveling cube that snaps on with a magnet as well. And then when you're done and you want to go ahead and put it in the sterilizer, you simply take this off and take this off, sterilize your bow, and you're done.
Very interesting. And for our listeners on the podcast, whether you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spreaker, the link for the YouTube video will be on the bottom of the description here, so you can actually see what Dave described here, because obviously the podcast, those that are listening on the podcast are not going to be able to have a visual representation of this, but
sure,
you're more than welcome to visit that link so you can see exactly what Dave is talking about here. Dave, what is your tag on Instagram?
That is a great question. I believe it is advanced_dental_designs_AD2, I believe. I'm going to check that real quickly for you.
Mm-hmm. And what we'll do for our listeners as well, we're going to be adding all the links as usual. You can always find the links below. I'm just sharing this because a lot of the dental technicians are listening to this podcast while they're working, and sometimes they don't have time to scroll down on their phone or tell Alexa to take them there, but we will definitely be adding this link. Do you have it there?
Yeah, it's if you do a quick search for advanced_dental_designs, you'll find us.
Perfect.
And please follow us. And we try to keep fresh content coming up multiple times a day. And so any new products we have coming up, any offers and sales or whatever it may be, people on Instagram will be the first to know.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Williams. Dave, it's been a pleasure having you with us. Thank you for sharing those solutions with this industry. I believe that anyone that has something good to share with this industry is welcome on our show. Thank you for coming out.
Hezekiah, thank you for having me this afternoon so much. Have a great weekend, everybody.
It's been a pleasure. Have a good one. Bye-bye.